Here's a very common scenario. You build a website, everything is fine, but then later on you realize that your forms are not sending emails. The problem is not normally with the form. So it's not about using Fluent Form or Gravity Form or any other sort of form. The form is fine. The problem is the email deliverability. Most of the hosting that used to allow email to be sent using PHP are not doing this anymore because it opens the domain name and the hosting to spam. So the old way of just sending the email using PHP messages is patchy and it's unreliable. So you need a more reliable way to send emails. The email deliverability in general relies on the domain reputation and the email authentication DNS records. These take a long time. So what we want to look at a quick workaround using a plugin and get the email out of the website in a reliable way without having to change your forms or trying to troubleshoot the form or change the plugin of the form. What we're going to do, we're going to use a plugin. There are so many of them. There's WP-SMTP, there are other plugins, but I personally use Post-SMTP because it also includes a log. So if the emails don't go out for any specific reason, you can look at the log and it will tell you exactly what the problem is and you can fix it. But also, I don't just use Post-SMTP as is. I use it with a third-party email sending application called SendGrid. There are also other options. There's SendGrid, there's SendInBlue, there's like, most of them work in a similar way, but I've always used this plugin with SendGrid with great results. And the free account of SendGrid would give me 200 messages per day, which is enough for a normal website. I don't normally do it for e-commerce websites because sometimes when they get more successful, they will need more than 200 messages a day. But if this is the case, you could also tell your client upfront that they'll need a SendGrid subscription. And once you have a subscription, the number of emails sent per day would go all the way up. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's in the thousands. So it's probably like 2,000 a day or something like that, which is not a problem. So without further ado, let's go in and do our workaround.
I need to add Postman SMTP. So you just go and add it like you add a regular plugin from the WordPress store. And remember that the plugin itself is called Postman SMTP, but when it actually gets installed, it's just called Post SMTP. And it's already installed here. So gonna go click on Post SMTP. The first screen that you see gives you a little bit of information. What I really like about it and what makes me like it more than any other WordPress SMTP plugin is that the reports here are free. So if you see underneath here, you've got the Post SMTP itself, and then you've got the email log. And this tells you exactly how many emails have been sent from the website. It even shows you the content of the emails, and it tells you whether it succeeded or failed. Out of the box, without any setup whatsoever, if I go and say show all settings, I've got the default, which uses the PHP mailer, and we all know this is not very reliable, and we need to change that. So in your setup, you've got many options. The first thing, you can choose SMTP, right? So leave this. If you choose SMTP server here, you leave PHP mailer, it's not going to be used anyway, and it will only be triggered in case the SMTP connection is not working. And then here, as you can see, you can put the mail server host name, the port number, the email, where is this coming from, and then you choose this like SSL certificate to use. Usually we do start TLS, and then the authentication, and then you have many types of authentication. Usually you choose login. So let me just get the credentials and come back here. So here we go. You're going to put the SMTP server that you'll get from your email service. If you remember, we've used the same thing to set up our email client in one of the previous videos. So here, you're not going to put POP or IMAP because here your website only sends email. It doesn't receive any email. So it's the SMTP server that you have to set up. So you put your username and your password. The username is usually the full email address. And then you could put the same email address in there. So this is the from email that will appear. So people receiving any notification from this website, the notification will come from courses@humantalents.training. And I'm just going to save changes. Once I've done that, I can go and test. So there are two things. There is a connectivity test that you can click on, and it will show you if your setup is correct and if your plugin is able to connect to your SMTP server. Okay, so this will show you some information about your connectivity test. And the next thing that you can do, if you go back to the main menu, is to send a test mail. So you can choose any address, and then you can send the test email to that specific address. Let's go here next. Failed. So it means that I'm having a problem because my SMTP settings are not right. And this is why exactly I like using this plugin, because it shows me step by step. If I have a problem, I can go on and fix the problem. And if you see when we did, so I did that on purpose actually to show you what happens when something is not going on. So these things are no longer hidden. In the connectivity test, if you remember, it did not connect to the port 465. It said that the port closed, which means that something was wrong. It was not able to log in. So something in my setup didn't work. I need to go back and check my setup and make sure everything is correct. So I'm going to go back and then make sure that everything is done. Yeah, see here where it says security none, I didn't choose start TTLS. So save the changes. Now go back and do my test again. So here's what I'm going to do. Before setting anything up here in the first tab, which is the account tab, I'm going to leave it as default. And I'm going to leave the mailer type as post SMTP, which we all know, as I just mentioned, it's not very reliable. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it alone here. And I'm going to go to the fallback tab. I'm going to put my SMTP server credentials. So I'm going to use my SMTP as a fallback. And here's how it works. You've put all your credentials, the username and password. Remember, the username is the full email name. Save it. And then let me go back to the main menu. Go back and send a test mail to your own email. Say next. Leave, and here it says it's a success and it's delivered to the SMTP server. So practically what happened, WordPress had selected my fallback and sent the message to my SMTP server. Let's just go and say finish. And if I go to the email log, here are the two messages that I sent to myself. I could view the message itself. This is how it would have arrived at my email address. And you could also look at the session transcript. So, and every time an email or a notification comes out of your website, it will be saved in this log. You can export it and then you can delete them or you can leave them. The log messages are very small in size, so they were not make your database humongous. But I'm like a compulsive cleaner. So what I usually do once in a while, I just export everything to a CSV file and then trash them all, cleaning up my database. But you don't have to do that. It's just a personal preference. If you leave it even for a year or two or more, it doesn't really clog up your database. So there's no issue here. And that's about the first way to set up your post SMTP plugin. So you can set it up, as you can see, you can set it up with your SMTP server, right? You can have it here. My last part is to show you how to use this with SendGrid. So you are not using it with your SMTP server because you probably don't have an SMTP server yet. You don't want to use it with your own personal Gmail account for a reason or another. Sometimes that setup also gets a little complicated. I would say it's very easy, but try it when you have a bit of time. It actually makes life easier. And then the last part is to use an application like SendGrid. So all what you need is to go and create a SendGrid account, then get the API key and post it here. So in order for the SendGrid account to work, you have to actually verify your domain. So let me go to SendGrid. Here's the new account from SendGrid that I created specifically for the course. I haven't yet created a single sender.
So before we start with SendGrid, I wanted to let you know that there are two ways to authenticate your email to be sent with SendGrid. You can authenticate one specific email address, which is the easiest way, but it will only allow you to send from this email address. So you need to set up your form and anything on your website that sends emails with the from email. So that email address becomes the email address that your users, when they receive an email, it will appear as the from. So this is where the email is coming from. But the other way with SendGrid is to authenticate the whole domain. This is a better way because it enables any emails from anything within your website. This also includes the emails for password reset. So how we do it is actually pretty good because it doesn't only affect the forms, it affects all the emails that are sent from your website, including the admin emails and notifications. So it will make all these emails more deliverable and more reliable. It's a better way to authenticate using your domain authentication, but it will have you doing or adding some CNAME DNS records. I do understand many people don't like to play with DNS or don't want to touch it at all, but in this situation, it's a must and it's much better and it's so easy. CNAME records are easy. It's just copy, paste, copy, paste. You have about 5 of them when you're using SendGrid. You just copy, paste the values as we will show you later. And once you click authenticate or check and the check is completed and you get the check mark, you're ready to send email. Let's see how it works.
The first thing is I want to authenticate the whole domain instead. So I'm going to click on authenticate domain. This is the domain that I want to authenticate, which is the internetguy.training. So the first thing is it says choose your DNS host. It has Cloudflare, and as you know, we're using Cloudflare to manage DNS. I'm going to leave the branding, the links for this domain as a no, and just click next. The domain I'll be sending from is this domain name, internetguy.training, and I'm going to click next. And here are the CNAME records SendGrid wants me to add. So all what I need to do is to go to my Cloudflare account. So here's my Cloudflare account. Choose the right domain. Click on DNS. And right here, I'm going to start creating some CNAMEs. So let's do that. The first one, here's the first CNAME. I'm going to copy. And here's the value, right? Let me just put myself a little bit higher here. so that I can copy this one when I come to it. So let's start. CNAME. Here is the name. And that's the value that goes with it. And you're gonna create all 3 accounts. So, okay, you see this error? Okay, let me do save. And then if you get this error, that's fine. The problem is this should not be proxied. So I'm gonna click that to unproxy this and then save it, and it should save. You do this for all the 3 accounts. So now that I've created the 3 accounts, I'm gonna click on I've added these records and I'm gonna verify. It worked, yay! Return to sender authentication. So now any sender authentication, any sender name that comes from this specific domain could be used to use SendGrid to send email from my website. You don't need to go and use a single sender, but if you wanted to, you can. So let me do this one as well. Show you where to go. So you can add a name, you can add an email address, the reply to address, fill in the whole thing, and create your first sender. Let me try using this without a sender. I haven't done that before. I'd usually create a sender, then authenticate the whole domain after. This time, because I'm showing you how it's done, I went to the domain verification first. I haven't created the sender. I don't know if it will work without a sender. So let's try. So the next thing is I need to get my API key. So click on the settings, go to API keys. Usually you wouldn't have one. You need to create a new one. So click on create an API, give it full access. Do not restrict it. Create and view. Just give it a name. I would say send from website or something like that. Create and view, and here's my API key. I need to click and copy. Don't click done yet, because once you click done, it will disappear. You won't be seeing it again. So just stay there for now. Go back to your post SMTP setup, paste your API key here, save changes. Go back to SendGrid and say done. Now SendGrid can be used to send email from the website. Let's go and try to send the test message again. Before I test it, let me just show you all settings. So right now, my main setting is the SendGrid API. My fallback is still my SMTP server. If you don't have an SMTP server, if you don't have a mail account somewhere outside your hosting, that's okay. You don't have to use a fallback. If you have SendGrid, things should work automatically, right? So let me go back to my main menu and send the test mail. Next. And it has succeeded. So I'll just finish here. Now, before we move on to the next step, I'm going to click to make sure everything has been set up. So right now, all what we've done, we've set up how the website will be sending email using this plugin. So we've got our main setup here, which is using the SendGrid API key. We've got our fallback with the SMTP. The next tab is very important. Here is the email address that will show to people receiving any notification from this website. So what is that email address? So I'm going to say, for example, web at okay, and then you can say prevent plugins and themes from changing this, meaning any email that's going to get out of this website will be labeled as coming from web at theinternetguy.training. If you're using SendGrid, you don't have to have a real email box with this address. That's the whole idea. We're using SendGrid because we don't want to go and create a new license on one of the famous email services. And the name, I'll just put my name. Prevent plugins and themes from changing this. And here, you've got to disable email validation. So what happens if somebody goes to your contact form, fills the form, but they don't put a valid email address? Usually, the form will be sent to you with that invalid email address, right? Also, what happened if you make a mistake in the email address you want to receive the notifications from your website on? So in general, when this is disabled, all emails will be going out anyway. And if there's a problem, then of course an error notification would come back. Your website wouldn't know how to deal with it, but anyway, there is an error that happens. So you could uncheck this box to let the plugin check the validity of every email it's sending to before sending the message. It just slows down things a little bit. Usually, I'll just leave it disabled and forget about it. Do I want a copy for every email coming out of my website to go somewhere else? So you can have that as well. And then you can have some additional headers. I usually leave these blank, but you could put the copy. You could put a reply to. So since this email isn't actually a proper mailbox, if people click on respond, they're not gonna get anywhere. So I need to give them a proper address to reply to. Okay, and save changes. Go back to show all settings. Just make sure we've done everything. So everything is saved. The logging is there. For the log that I showed you, here is where you can control how many log messages or how many log entries you want to keep. So here is 250 messages, and then it starts to overwrite itself. That's why I was telling you earlier, it will not make your database grow forever, because after 250, it will start overwriting the old messages in the log. And then I'll leave this as is. I don't normally change anywhere here. And then you have the notifications. Should something be going wrong with the plugin, who do you want to be notified? So it will be the admin email here. Everything looks perfect. Now let's go and get one of our forms and test it. So here's the contact us page. Let's go and edit to make sure that the form on the page is set up correctly. So here I am. Here's a regular Divi form. I just need to make sure that it knows where to send the email. So here I am, a regular form on a page. I just need to make sure I'm telling the form where to send its messages. And something to note, sometimes when you use SendGrid, you don't get the input that somebody has inputted in your form. You just get a notification that someone filled the form, but you don't get what's in the form, which is exactly the information that you want. So if you have used or set up SendGrid on your website, please make sure that you have the message pattern. It's so easy. If you click on that question mark, it tells you what to do. So it's the field ID, which is, if you scroll up a little bit, it will tell you, or it will show you what IDs you have called your fields. So all what I've done is just, I've got like the first letter is capital, and that's it. So all what I need to do is just to do write something here, and this would form whatever result I'll get when somebody fills in this form. So I will say this is a message from the website. And I would say, I don't know, for example, client name, and just do the 2 percentage signs and then the field ID and the 2 percentage signs again. And then you do the same thing, email address. Just scroll up to make sure I'm doing it right. Scroll up one more time, just make sure the spelling is correct. And save your form, save your page, and let's test it. So here we are. Let me just move myself to the side and put the name and an email address. Okay, I'm sending the message to my email address. So I don't want the from and the to be the exact same email. So I'm just going to use any email that I have. I'll call it test message 1, send. Looks like it worked. So here it is, I got it. Everything is working as it should. If I click here, it tells me how I received this email. And if you look here, it says emailed by EM93, blah, 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 right? This is SendGrid. If I go back to SendGrid, if you remember, when we were setting the C names, right? There was a C name. Let's go to DNS here on my Cloudflare. There was a C name that's called EM9387, right? So that's my user on the SendGrid account. And that's exactly what was used to send this message from my website. So everything is working exactly as it should. If I go back here and I go back to my dashboard in WordPress and I go to post SMTP and email log, it will also show me this message. That's it. If I view the message, here it is. And this wraps up this lesson. Thank you. See you on the next one. One last thing before we wrap up our SendGrid part of this course is I wanted to show you the activity. This is something that you have to check periodically, especially if you suspect you're having email deliverability problems and you're using SendGrid. So once I click on activity, this is pretty much the log file of SendGrid itself. And you could search by email address, which means if you have your email address on the contact form and you're not receiving anything, chances are there is a problem somewhere. So you could put your email address here, or you could leave it blank and just select the dates, search, and it will show you all the messages. These are the 2 messages. One of them was actually an alert from a plugin, which is my WordFence security plugin. The other one was the message that I sent using the form. Here it is, and it tells you that it's processed and it's delivered, and everything looks pretty much good. But if you have any errors, if for any reason SendGrid was not able to send the message where it should arrive, it would give you an error here and it will explain what the error is. And this way you can troubleshoot it. So you've got 2 log files, which is really cool. One of them is right on your website, which is the post SMTP log through post SMTP email log. And the other one is your SendGrid activity log, and everything should show here. This way, there is no way you'll have a problem with email deliverability from this website and you wouldn't know about it. If you see anything here, it's easy to troubleshoot, but if you need help, shoot me an email and I can help you translate what this error message is and what's the next course of action. This wraps up this lesson of our course. See you in the next one. Bye.